Financial crises, a sunken cruise liner and a country trying to mend its broken image. On this week's programme, we look back at the last 12 months in travel, the year the Eurozone almost came apart at the seams. We'll reflect on our highlights and bring you the best bits of Fast Track 2012.
For you.
And later, in the Fast Track Travel Clinic, a non-stop flight that landed halfway to refuel.
Hello and welcome to Fast Track. I'm Fiona Foster. So it's the end of the year and time to reflect. The news headlines over the past 12 months have often been dominated by the ongoing conflict in Syria. But for many in the travel world, the teetering economies of southern Europe have also been a major cause for concern. In fact, the year began with some tragic symbolism off the northwest coast of Italy. Here's Rajan with our review of 2012.
A year of triumph, tragedy and transition. And many of these events influenced and intersected with the world of travel. This was the year when they reckoned for the first time more than 1 billion tourists travel somewhere around the planet. And in fact, in spite of worldwide economic gloom, tourism and travel proved to be pretty resilient. The fact is, cheaper and faster routes and more affluent travellers from emerging countries are making a big difference.
Last year, we saw a little bit of a weakening in the performance of the emerging destinations. The tragedy that hit Japan, the uprising and the development in the Middle East and North Africa affected the developing world tremendously in Asia, in Africa and the Middle East. This year, they sprung back again.
But of course, regionally, travel isn't only affected by the economic climate, but by local factors too. And some destinations and people have suffered for reasons beyond their control, like Acapulco in Mexico.
A war over cocaine trafficking is sweeping through Mexico, killing thousands.
We visited there at the beginning of the year and saw the direct impact of non-stop global news about gang warfare.
It's very disappointing because you put all your life, you put all your efforts into a destination that is one of the most beautiful bays in the world with guaranteed weather, very nice local people, very warm, and something like this comes to destroy us.
I caught up with the Mexican tourism minister recently and asked her if things were improving.
If you look at the numbers for the last 12 months, you will see that we have experienced an increase of visitors from more than 140 nationalities, including the UK. So that is pretty much telling us that more and more people from all over the world are coming to Mexico and enjoying the experience.
The year didn't get off to a great start for the airline industry. January saw the end of the line for the Spanish carrier Spanair. Then in February, Hungary's national carrier Malev folded, and just a few weeks later, Air Australia collapsed. Hundreds of flights were cancelled and thousands of passengers were left stranded. Next came record snowfall and Arctic winds causing more havoc for travellers across Europe, as the coldest temperatures in decades forced airports to close. And a discovery of small cracks in the wings of a Qantas A380 caused an entire fleet to be grounded so an investigation could take place. Every now and again, one incident, one tragedy can shake an industry to its very core. And that's what happened at the beginning of this year when the Costa Concordia cruise liner crashed off the coast of Italy, killing more than 30 passengers and crew. It was a sad coincidence that this happened in the same year as the 100th anniversary of the Titanic disaster. 4,000 passengers were guided to safety in the dark, and the captain was subsequently accused of manslaughter. But did the disaster show up a whole new raft of safety problems?
Our safety review was holistic, it was thorough, it was robust, and it was overseen by a panel of experts. And as a result of that review, we've already identified and to a large extent implemented 10 new safety policies.
The Costa Concordia criminal case is by no means over. The ship itself has yet to be hauled out of the water, but the industry is very upbeat these days.
In the immediate aftermath of the Costa Concordia, we saw a pause in booking activity. That is largely, of course, because in tribute to the victims, the cruise companies restricted their advertising and their promotional activities. But quite quickly we saw bookings getting back to their levels of pre-Concordia.
The London Olympics in August saw the common syndrome of first dire warnings of overcrowding and bumped up prices, followed by an actual dip in visitor numbers during the event. But ultimately, the long-term brand value of the UK will benefit from the exposure. Meanwhile, the ongoing turmoil in the Middle East saw countries like Egypt and Syria continue to hemorrhage tourists, while others like Qatar and Morocco picked up on the benefits. And Manchester Airport in the UK had a lot to answer for when one 11-year-old made it all the way to Rome without a passport or a ticket.
In Europe in 2012, it was very much a story of troubled economies trying to claw their way back into solvency. And for the likes of Greece, it was tourism that provided the most hope for recovery.
But in June, we visited Athens at the height of tension and saw the plight of independent hoteliers in particular.
We're very close to shutting down. We're struggling and making a lot of sacrifices. But it's not just about us. When a hotel closes, there are sometimes hundreds of employees that will lose their jobs. That is the saddest thing.
So what's happened since then? Well, the remarkable grassroots efforts of the Greek diaspora has produced crowdfunding tourism campaigns like Up Greek Tourism. After they raised the money to fund a billboard advertising Greece in New York's Times Square earlier this year, they're now planning to do the same in London next February.
The austerity measures have been so hard. People have seen their wages being cut by 50%, some of them. They've seen more taxes coming in their houses that had to be paid as ASAP, and they don't see any money coming in. So definitely you should be trying to create more plans as well in order to invest in tourism and promote Greece all over the world.
Superstorm Sandy, today still fresh in the minds of many, devastated much of the US coastline in October. More than 100 people died, thousands of homes were destroyed, and tens of thousands of tourists were left stranded. Airports in the US, Canada and the Caribbean all had to be shut for days at a time. In Holland, Amsterdam's mayor called for a U-turn for a planned new law that would have banned tourists from smoking cannabis in the city's coffee shops. And India overturned a ban on tourism in tiger reserves. In 2012, the World Travel and Tourism Council reckoned their industry grew by 3% and jobs in the industry by 2.5 million. Climate change, hotspots of social unrest and the unfair distribution of the proceeds from tourism still remain unresolved issues. But there is confidence in the air.
Growth has been sustained in spite of so many challenges and odds. The most serious economic crisis and challenge this generation has ever faced, serious geopolitical changes and political upheavals all over the world, natural crisis, man-made or natural, are springing everywhere. In spite of that, growth has continued.
Rajan reporting on some of the key events that have impacted on the world of travel in 2012. And it's been quite a year. So what do you think of our roundup? What have we missed? And how will you remember the year from your travels? Do let us know. Our address, as usual, is fasttrack@bbc.com. Now let's have a look at what's been making headlines in the world of travel this week.
Beijing's visa rules are being relaxed slightly from January. It means travellers from a list of 45 countries will be able to spend up to 72 hours visa-free in the Chinese capital. The government says more than 5 million transit passengers passed through the city last year. and removing the need for a visa might tempt some of them to make a stopover. In Fiji, thousands of holidaymakers were left stranded this week following tropical cyclone Evan. It lasted about 12 hours and destroyed homes and flooded roads and rivers. There were no reports of any deaths on the Pacific island, and the international airport at Nadi reopened the next day. Dubai Airport's been road testing its new A380 concourse with the help of around 1,100 locals. It'll be the world's only facility dedicated solely to super jumbos when it opens early next year. It should be able to handle around 20 of the planes simultaneously. Look away now if you're not good with flying. Pictures have been released of pilots battling heavy winds to take off and land at Bilbao Airport in northern Spain. Despite the weather, earlier this month, no departures were cancelled, but arrivals from Madrid and Valencia had to be diverted. A tourist swimming in a river in Australia got a shock when a nearby crocodile splash-landed on his head. The men were visiting Litchfield National Park in the Northern Territory when the reptile dozing on the rocks suddenly leapt out. Nobody was hurt. And if you happen to be in Rhode Island in the United States for the Christmas holidays, you might encounter this very strange annual tradition.
They call me the Dancing Cop. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island. I've been directing traffic my way for 27 years.
Every December, Tony, who has officially retired, is asked to return to work to entertain drivers in the run-up to the holiday season. City officials hope his eccentric moves will bring more visitors downtown.
Well, that's it for now, but do stay with us because coming up after the break, Simon Calder reopens his travel clinic with tips for a 7-hour layover in Hong Kong, and we look back over our favourite moments of 2012. And believe me, there's no shortage of material.
Hello and welcome to the Fast Track Travel Clinic with me, Simon Calder. And let's start with a question from Ari Ryan in Toronto, who boarded an Ethiopian Airlines flight from his home city to Addis Ababa on what he believed to be a non-stop trip from Canada to Africa.
We ended up making an unscheduled stop in Paris. I subsequently learned that two colleagues on the same route on separate days also had unscheduled stops in Paris or Rome. We paid extra for a direct flight. Do we have any recourse?
Ari, direct doesn't always mean non-stop, but in the case of Ethiopian Flight 503 from Toronto to Addis Ababa, it's supposed to. With a distance of more than 7,000 miles and a journey time of over 14 hours, it's one of the longest flights in the world. Ethiopian Airlines told me it does all it can to stick to the timetable, but if headwinds are unhelpful, then the plane has to stop along the way, adding several hours to the journey. A flight that Christoph Flink booked from his hometown in Shanghai to Moscow did go non-stop. The problem was he wasn't aboard because the Aeroflot flight was overbooked.
All I was offered was a flight the next day and a third-class hotel for the night. Am I entitled to compensation?
Christoph, most airlines overbook from time to time because they know there are usually some no-shows. In the USA and Europe, there are strict rules about how the airlines must handle overbooking, for example by offering rewards to passengers who are prepared to take a later flight. But elsewhere in the world, your rights are much less clear. And in your case, it doesn't help that Russia hasn't signed up to the 1999 Montreal Convention on Passengers' Rights, and therefore Aeroflot is covered by the less onerous 1929 Warsaw Convention. So I can't see any hope for recompense besides that free night in a third-class hotel. Next, you may recall the travel clinic question about how much time must remain on passports. Kim O'Neill from Salalah in Oman says he takes exception to my advice that you can use an EU passport right up to midnight on the day it expires.
Such advice needs a health warning, as we found out to our cost. My son was refused boarding on his flight to Oman, apparently because of airline rules, as he only had 3 months left on his British passport. That cost me $1,500. So whose rules apply, the airlines or Europe's?
Kim, the answer is neither. The destination country, in this case Oman, decides. The Royal Oman Police say visitors' passports must be valid for not less than 6 months. The airline correctly applied that rule. My advice was purely about travelling within the EU. I made no promises about the rest of the world, where a tangle of different rules apply. I hope this stressful and expensive episode reminds everyone who's watching to check their passport expiry date now, and if the 6-month mark is getting close, apply for a replacement today. Finally, Alex Venter from Queensland in Australia is flying from Brisbane to London on New Year's Eve via Hong Kong.
We land in Hong Kong at 6 p.m. and depart at 1 in the morning on New Year's Day. What do you reckon we do during those 7 hours? We are British passport holders. Can we leave the airport?
Yes, you can, Alex, and ultra-efficient Hong Kong Airport is ideal for a quick escape between flights. It's all a question of planning. Get some Hong Kong dollars in advance to save time when you land. Your baggage will be checked straight through to London, which means you can get through customs and immigration in a flash. Buy a same-day return ticket for the Airport Express train for 100 Hong Kong dollars, which is about $13 US. And 24 minutes later you'll be at Hong Kong Central and immersed in one of the most exciting places on the planet. From me, Simon Calder, bye for now and see you in 2013.
Simon Calder with the final travel clinic of this year. Well, we've been all over the world in the past 12 months and had all flavours of fun. From canyoning in New Zealand to litter picking in Rio to wrestling in Mexico. So we thought we'd take a little amble along memory lane to bring you the very best bits of Fast Track 2012. We hope you enjoy them as much as we have.
We've rappelled 35 metres into the cave. We've traversed along a little and done a zip line in the dark under the glowworms down to the next level.
This is called parkour, or free running. Not just a sport, but a philosophy, say its exponents.
Just look at this, there are penguins as far as the eye can see. Thousands and thousands of them. They smell a bit, but the view's incredible.
Brasilia was designed like a giant aeroplane in an era, don't forget, when flying was still cool and glamorous.
His walking frame had gone missing somewhere between London and Stockholm.
On the plane, maybe?
No, I've checked that.
It's definitely not on the plane. For the last time, you don't have to touch me. I'm unfortunately having to be very stubborn about this.
Sweet baby, don't you ever worry about a thing.
My name's Audrey Hepburn, and I'd like to check in, please.
Man meets rhino for the first time and enjoys it.
Cool glasses! All the rage. So this is the borscht that I made in the kitchen?
Yes, exactly. I hope you did not poison me.
For you.
And you're in charge of tourism for here, yeah?
Just be you and me. When we let the sun melt the cares away.
Okay, I'm gonna make a request. We go back to the shore now.
Right now we can hear a nuthatch, we can hear a chaffinch, there's wood pigeon calling, farther there are some woodpeckers drumming. This is daytime, this is a spring coming.
Now listen, I'm not sentimental, but when you see a little baby monkey like this, your heart just melts.
What a year. Well, let's hope that 2013 brings us just as many adventures. Well, that's it for now, but we've already got plenty lined up for the beginning of the new year. Our first big trip is to that country once called the dullest place on earth. We're in Qatar, which has spent billions over the past decade trying to overturn that reputation. But has it succeeded? Rajan travels through the desert kingdom to find out. In the meantime, we're showing two of our favourite trips to Kenya and Brazil over the next couple of weeks. And don't forget, you can stay in touch on Twitter, Pinterest and Facebook. We've got all sorts on there. Until next time though, from the freezing cold but very festive Leadenhall Market in London, thanks for watching and goodbye.
it.